Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor Ali, Professor Khayra. Do I pronounce your name right? Yeah. Professor Najla, for this interesting presentation. We know that from your presentation, heritage and innovation are two concepts, often coexist in a dynamic relationship. I just want to ask one question, then I will open the ground for the audience if they want to ask a question. How can we honor our and preserve our heritage while embracing the innovation of modernity? Yeah, anyone who wants?
Race. Would you like to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the question is, how can we
Honor our and preserve our
preserve?
heritage while at the same time embracing the innovation of modernity?
Preserving heritage is key to the identity of a place. And I think by documenting it, acknowledging it first, documenting it, preserving it, you will be having it as a reference. Now, innovation does not conflict with heritage. And I think if the creation, and I think the examples that we saw today were very illustrative in terms of how the traditional or the heritage elements can be taken as an inspiration and reinterpreted in a creative and innovative way. That may challenge some people. I like the quote when you said that the mosque was considered as a fish by some people. So I can say that that could be a challenge, but the static copying of elements and just reproducing them exactly as they are will create an inauthentic space. We have spaces like that in the UAE where they reproduce, and then the first thing some visitors would say, but it's
Actually, we have a big debate about, traditional, preserving the heritage and innovation and modernity. So many architects and designers think that really we can raise the traditional building and have a new buildings, while others say, no, we have to preserve our cultural identity and really take the essence of the past in our future. We don't want to import some design from outside and put it in the sake of modernity.
I think I will just one sentence. I'll pass it on to my colleagues. I think there are two parts to it. There is the creation of new, inspired by the heritage, which is, I think, open to innovation and creativity, and there is the preservation of heritage. I mean, there's no place. I studied in England, and I was amazed when I walked by some roads that the facade is kept, and behind it, they completely created a new building, modern with all the amenities. But it's so essential for them to keep their heritage that they basically, may be limited to that. That's what I'm saying. There are two parts to it. There is creation inspired, and there I think innovation and creativity have to play a role. Preserving heritage, I think, is just as key. That's your identity, that's your culture, that's your referent. And I think it's important to preserve. But if you're doing a totally new designs, this could be only used, I believe, as an inspiration. I've monopolized enough.
Because I'm saying, if I want to add something to any historic city around the world, if I add all the new technology, innovation to any building in the historic city, and you cannot convince people to come and live in it, honestly speaking. They prefer to live outside in a solitary building, while really they feel that the social life is different from the. Yani we are visiting different countries around the world just to enjoy the tradition of the past in this country. But if you're asking people, can you come and live in this very beautiful house in the historic city? Oh, they will not. They will refuse.
For me, perhaps I would like to say before, for heritage, the preservation of heritage, we need also to be aware of this heritage, not to make it as something يعني تحنيط التراث.
Yeah, we don't want to imitate
يعني
the past.
I'm not talking about design. Now it's about how we preserve heritage. Sometimes we look at heritage, something that need to be preserved as it is. We need to preserve it, but we need it to be in the life of people. We need to think about how this heritage can be lived in today's life, adapted to our new life. This is the part about the heritage. About the innovation and how we design, it's important to be aware and to read more, to be aware how we can preserve our identity, not in a way, as I was saying, to mimic the past. It's important to be aware what are the main concepts of our, for example, in our identity and civilization. And as I was saying, the example of the mosque, Masjid al-Rasul عليه الصلاة والسلام ما كانش model. يعني we used
It's functional more, functional.
yeah, but we used other models in Turkey, the Me'mar Sinan mosques in Turkey, or there are many examples, and Islam adapted in all the region it went there. It's not about to bring a model
I want
and
to add
use
this.
it.
Can I add one thing here? If you look at the Ottoman period, it's last for more than 500 years. You cannot find really within this 500 years with a huge innovation in construction, in building material, and everything. The system is still the same system within 500 years. You cannot find really a gap in design itself, in the design philosophy. Sinan last in, in 16th century. So when we talk about 500 years, there is no a big gap in the design itself. And even though if you go and look in any period, Islamic period, if you take the Umayyad in Spain, it lasts for 500 or 700 years also. Look at the architecture there. You feel really the same, the continuity, I mean, about, you couldn't find a gap. Though, are we talking about exporting style from outside in a sake of innovation? Are we talking about that the first school of architecture in Europe and most of the Arab people or students go and learn them and come and exporting these styles to our country, and then for the sake of innovation we say, okay, we are talking about innovation, we know everything is changed. This is my point, and I'll stop here. Anybody want to ask a question from the audience? Give the chance, because we have a limit of time. I know this discussion will not end within 15 minutes actually. Anybody want to add or have a question? Okay. So
sure. I would wait for any interventions from the respective.
إذا أعطيناك إياه ما بتخلصش اليوم أنت.
Yeah, I was just waiting for maybe interventions from the respected audience.
أخت فاطمة بتسأل سؤال.
I have a question. We are trying a lot with like for me, I'm designer. So I'm trying to convince customers to create like new design, especially for religious building. It's very hard to convince them, really. So if you have any suggestions.
I didn't get your point.
I think I get it. I will repeat it. So my colleague's valuable question is she's having a tough time to convince the client to go for innovative solutions, right? And particularly when it comes to religious buildings and mosques and so on. And I think this is so much related to what I want to comment with on this lovely discussion, because I want to differentiate between preserving and conserving heritage, because heritage in each city, in each country is fundamentally important. And therefore, قصبة in Algeria, it's important to preserve. In Tunisia, البلد القديم in Tunisia, Egypt, محرق, and so on and so forth. My fundamental problem, particularly in the Middle East and in the Gulf, that we fall into the trap, as I was trying to illustrate in my lecture, is that identity and manifesting our personality is related to the past, is related to what was done before. And therefore, I always pose a very simple question. Imagine that all what we are doing in Manama and Muharraq, for instance, is a replica of Beit al-Sheikh Zayed and Beit Sheikh Khalifa and Beit Sheikh Ali Khalifa and so on and so forth. And imagine 200 years from today, what people would say about us. The architects and the designers of this time, they had a fundamental problem because all what they were doing was imitation. So I think it's about changing the mindset. And I totally agree with you that this mindset is not only about architects and urban designers, but also the public, that we need to educate the society, we need to educate the community that when we talk about our identity, when we talk about how we are proud of being Bahrainis or Tunisians or Algeria, this is not only related to the past, it's related to our contemporary contribution. So I think that this gap is fundamentally important to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this inspiring presentations. I don't know if it's a comment or a question, but I think one of the things that makes people struggle when it comes to creating, as you said, a contemporary identity is we're still, when it comes to conserving a heritage or a tradition, we look at shapes. We don't look at values, perceptions. And what is special about our culture is the way we build relationship, the way we socialize, the way we contact with each other. So they create such an amazing spaces that we invite people to socialize, but the most social informal space is next to a karak shop, for example. So for example, we create majlis, a luxury majlis. But when you really look at Bahraini houses, especially today, you'll see the most beautiful informal gathering happens outside. Just putting a hasir or those kind of rugs, sitting on it, bringing some fire, tea on the teapot, and so on. So I think as an architect and interior design, we sometimes struggle to understand the real value and the real human behavior of our Gulf people. So I think this is what makes even sometimes designer feel difficulty to convince people, because they are convincing them with shapes, with lines, but they are not convincing them with a way of living. Thank you.
Any question?
I have a question for Professor Khira. It was regarding the future of the Gulf. Don't you see that cognitive cities might be the future of the Gulf? Maybe it's implemented maybe in Riyadh, I guess. And the target in Riyadh are the cognitive cities. So aren't they the future of the Gulf, maybe?
That's a very good question. I think, if I may, there is no single definition of what could be the Gulf city. I would find it hard to put it as one concept. I think the shared values, what was referred to, for example, creating, understanding the way of life and the shared values is what should be translated into the spaces. That's what I think will create the state, harmonizing tradition with modernity, looking into the connection that people can have in those spaces, I think are what will drive and shape the future of the cities in the Gulf and in many other places. Some have already preserved that aspect. Some are looking for how we can recreate what we may have had. And I think it's based on connectivity, social, environmental, again, but social in particular. Thank you.
Thank you for our distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Ali, Professor Khaira, Professor Najla, for your time.